Well, hello again, everybody. Welcome back to Walking Through the Scriptures with Joseph Bahoda. I'm your host, Joe Bahoda, and I got another movie review for you today, and this is Godzilla Minus One. Now, this is a movie that I've been wanting to watch like forever. I remember when it came out in theaters a while back, I wanted to see it so badly, but I didn't have a chance to. So many things in my life popped up. I never got a chance to see it. And then even when it was out of theaters, I was waiting for it to, for like Amazon or somebody to pick it up so I could stream it off, Amazon Prime or something like that. But none of the streaming services had it, Hulu or anything else. So I was like, oh my gosh. But I just found out this weekend that it was released on Netflix. So Godzilla Minus One is on Netflix, and I just happened to see it this past weekend. And I'm here to tell you, this movie is pretty good. Now, I'm not going to tell you everything that happens because I don't want to spoil everything. But when I read the critics' reviews on it, they're like, oh, this is an epic masterpiece. Now, I'm not going to say it's an epic masterpiece, but I give this movie a very strong B+. This is a good movie. Godzilla Minus One is a very good movie. It definitely kept my interest. And I've been a Godzilla fan for a long time. This is one of the reasons I wanted to see it, even since like the 60s. Remember when they used to talk? And like they used to speak in Japanese, but they would dub it in English so the lips wouldn't match the words. I remember even those old Godzilla movies, man. I was a kid. I was a fan of those as a kid. And I have tomorrow be my 8-year-old son's birthday. And I got my 8-year-old into those old Godzilla movies too. So he's now watching the old Godzilla movies. And even the newer, like Godzilla and Kong and all that, the latest ones. I was into all of them. So I've been a Godzilla fan now since I was a little kid. So I've wanted to see this movie for a long time, and this movie is good. Now it is set kind of in the old Godzilla style where they basically speak in Japanese, but they dub it in English. This may not work for some. If you're not used to that, that's going to throw you off a little bit. That may upset you or frustrate you a little bit, because it is spoken in the old Godzilla format of the 1960s Godzilla movies. If you're not used to that, that may not work for you. However, that did work for me because, again, I loved the nostalgia of it. I was kind of reminded of when I was a little boy watching those old Godzilla movies again. So watching it like that, it did bring me back to when I was a kid again. And I enjoyed that. I really did like that. Now, for some of you, that may not work. But for me, it did work, and I really enjoyed it. The other reason I like the English dubbing of the words is there is no subtitles. You don't have to read it. Now, this movie's 2 hours and 5 minutes long, so I was a fan of that. That means I don't have 2 hours worth of reading that I have to do. Okay? So I actually enjoyed the fact that they talked it in English. They dubbed it in English. That way I don't have 2 hours worth of subtitles I got to read. So this is a win-win for me. So that's the style of it. But I enjoyed that, because it took me back to my childhood, which I liked. The other thing I love is I love the setting of this movie. This movie is obviously in Japan, and it's during or right as World War II is ending, and then right after World War II. It takes place, there's a Japanese fighter pilot. He lands on this island off of Japan in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And that is when a smaller Godzilla comes up onto the shore. Now, this is right as either the World War II was ending. But he comes onto the shore and they hear the big siren. So they think they're getting attacked because they're still in the middle of the war. And they are getting attacked, but it's not by the Americans or anybody else like that. They're getting attacked by a smaller version of Godzilla. And to make sure, long story short, Godzilla kills everybody on the island except for the fighter pilot and basically his engineer mechanic. They're like the only two people that live from the attack. And Godzilla is big, but he's not that big yet. Okay? A couple things about that. So that's like the beginning of the movie. The fact that this movie took place in Japan is not a surprise because Godzilla and Japan have been synonymous for a long time. But the fact that they chose to do this movie right as the war was ending, and the movie continues then after the two bombs, we bombed Japan with the 2 nuclear bombs and basically just devastated Japan. As a military man, the fact that they decided to do the setting of Japan just as World War II was ending, and right after we dropped the bombs and World War II ended and devastated Japan. That's the setting and background and backdrop for this movie. As a military man, that completely worked for me. Because obviously I know the history, I know our history of how we bombed Japan and we dropped the 2 nuclear bombs and everything. So this resonated with me historically and as a military soldier a lot. And the fact that they used Japan and its devastation after the war as the setting for this movie, boy, was that an extremely bold choice. But I'm here to tell you, it worked. That boldness paid off, and that boldness paid off in spades. To have it used as the backdrop or muse for this movie, that was a bold choice, but that was a bold choice that paid off. So, make a long story short, Godzilla, he attacks the island, and then that fighter pilot comes back to a town. Now, this is like when the war was over. He comes back to his hometown or whatever, and it's completely devastated by all these, all the bombs and stuff, right? So he meets this girl who's basically his friend, and also there's a little baby because the parents got killed in the war. So there's a little baby. So this young lady decides to take this little baby in, and with this fighter pilot, and they manage to somehow build a life together, taking care of the little baby and all of that in the middle of this nuclear blown up village. So this movie is really about the human condition and the human struggle, but humanity overcoming in the midst of extreme challenges and extreme circumstances. And the fact that they used the World War II backdrop of this in Japan is, wow, it's amazingly done. And this movie's like low budget as far as they didn't spend a lot of money to make this movie, but it's extremely well done. It is extremely, extremely well done. And because of that backdrop and because of the suffering, but overcoming suffering in the human condition, it does wonders to give character development for these characters. So even though these characters are Japanese and their words are dubbed in English, like you really do start to feel for them, and you really do want to know what happens to these characters, because you really do get mentally and emotionally involved. At least I did. I mean, I was really, suckered into the story. I was there. So anyway, they build a life together, and there's this little baby. But apparently, I guess around two years or so pass, because at the end of the movie, that little baby's now like a toddler. She's like 2 or so. So about 1.5 to 2 years pass. And in that 2 years, Godzilla comes back. But now he's not the little Godzilla, if you will, that he was on the island. He's now huge. He's now the size of skyscrapers. And he comes on shore and he destroys this village or city, and 30,000 Japanese people got killed in one shot. So now the Japanese have to rally to basically go to war against Godzilla. Now there's a powerful scene there because Godzilla attacks Japan, but because of the aftermath of the war, the Americans, and because of democracy and communism and all that, and they don't want to bring World War III, the Chinese and the Russians aren't going to help them, and obviously we're not going to help them either because of democracy and our history with the war. So literally Japan is by themselves on this. So like as they go to war against Godzilla, nobody's going to help them. So there's a powerful scene of how they're going to destroy Godzilla, but they're like, look, we just went to war and we just got devastated and we lost everything. We lost our cities, we lost our parents, we lost, everything we have, and now you want us to go to war again? And there's a huge, powerful scene where they have this big meeting, and some of the men, there's like, look, I can't do this. I already sacrificed enough. We lost the war. We were devastated by the nuclear bombs. Like, we just can't do this. So some of the men, they do decide not to do it. But some of the men do decide to stay, and there's a powerful, like, band of brothers as you're coming to defend your nation once again, only this time against Godzilla. Again, as a military man, that band of brothers scene worked for me. It really, 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 really worked for me. And I got emotionally involved. And I was really intrigued of that band of brothers concept, and also how they're going to come together and defeat Godzilla. Which is another fascinating aspect of this movie. Earlier in the movie, they're trying to attack. If you look at the thumbnail, you'll see that little boat, and there's Godzilla behind it chasing it. In that scene, that's earlier in the movie, they take like an old submarine bomb that the Japanese had, and they throw it at Godzilla. And Godzilla swallows it, and then they hit the little button, and the bomb blows up, and it blows Godzilla's face off. And I was like, oh my gosh, like they are really going to kill Godzilla. This is going to work. And Godzilla's face is half blown off. But then Godzilla's face starts to regenerate, and his face grows back. And oh, by the way, Godzilla has the blue nuclear stuff coming out of his mouth. They have all that in this movie too. But Godzilla's face grows back. And I'm like, oh, now you guys are in a bad way. Because conventional weapons don't kill Godzilla now. Because if you blow him up, he'll just regenerate and come back. So if you hit him with like tank bombs, and you hit him with like those big rockets that fall off, that fly out of the battleships in the sea, if you hit him with all that, yeah, he'll get hurt, but then he'll just regenerate and get healthy again. So I was like, oh, man, I didn't see that coming. I didn't see his face getting blown off. I also didn't see his face regenerating. But now I'm like, okay, how are you going to kill Godzilla and the fact that conventional weapons don't work? So after they have that band of brothers scene of how they're going to kill Godzilla, and that scene really, really worked for me. They come up with a plan to kill Godzilla. And that's like the last 30 minutes of the movie is a huge battle scene of them taking on Godzilla. And I'll end it with that. This movie worked for me, guys. It really, really worked for me. Now, the only thing that didn't work, remember I said earlier how they speak in Japanese, but they dub it in English. That does work for me, but it does, however, get tedious and old because there are some scenes. Again, this movie really focuses on the human condition and how we as humans can overcome extreme circumstances. Okay, so it's really not about Godzilla. So you're not going to see Godzilla a lot in this movie. There's going to be a lot of scenes about the human condition, and therefore these Japanese people. And there's a lot of dialogue. And when that dialogue is dubbed in English, it can get really old. It can get kind of boring and kind of stale a little bit. There are some parts where it just kind of drags, and when you're doing it in English dubbing, you really got to have some patience to get through that. I'm not going to lie. So that was a downer for me because, again, I love the English dubbing because of the nostalgia of it, but it does get overwhelming in spots. But, so I give this movie a B+. But everything else about this movie really, 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 really works. So again, very strong B+ for this movie. The backdrop of World War II, the backdrop of Godzilla right after World War II, the backdrop of the human condition and overcoming suffering and under extreme circumstances, whether it's World War II or Godzilla. And yes, as weird as that sounds, all of that worked for me. All of it worked for me. So very strong B+ on this movie. It's on Netflix now. Go ahead and see it. I think you may enjoy it. If you get through the English dubbing, I think you really enjoy it. But Godzilla -1. Very strong B+. I recommend this movie, and you should see it. For being so-called low budget, it's pretty good. I believe it won an Oscar for like visual effects too. So very, very good. Very, very good movie. So see Godzilla -1. I hope you enjoyed it like I did. Until next time, God bless everybody.